Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 5 of Event Tech Live 2020. It's great to have you back with us today. First thing this morning, congratulations to all of the winners at last night's Event Technology Awards, and congratulations to our Event Tech Startup winner of 2020, Booth Guru. More information about all the award winners are available on eventtech.awards.co.uk. And over to our first session of the day, we're going to bring in Mr. Matt Coyne and Adam Barber, who are standing by, ready with their session, How Financing Wind Approached Their Pivot to Virtual. Good morning, gentlemen. Are you both well?
Good morning. Well, how are you?
Not too bad at all, thanks. We're right on time. We're ready for you. Matt, I'm going to hand the reins over to you. I'll see you very soon.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And great job you've been doing this week, by the way. How you've kept this up for 5 days in a row, I'll never know. So well done, mate.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Heavy amounts of caffeine, right?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe not too many drinks at the virtual awards last night as well. But okay, so those that don't know me, I'm Matt Coyne. I run the Waves Connects podcast, which is really focused about helping our industry look at what's next for them, or rather the people look at what's next for them. So do check it out at wavesconnects.com/podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Adam Barber. Welcome, Adam. Adam's MD of Tamarind Group, who spearheaded the pivot, or yesterday I heard the word pirouette, which I quite liked, from physical to virtual on their Financing Wind event. Adam called himself an imposter in the events industry when we first spoke. I think he's far from it. I think he's challenging the norm and come up with something new. So we're going to be sharing his experience of flipping that his events from physical to virtual, how they went on to build their own bespoke broadcast studio, and we'll also be looking at what's next for them in the group as they continue. So Adam, good morning.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. So when we had our first call a few weeks ago, just to so I could learn a little bit more about what you do, I think we spent the first 45 minutes talking about anything but events. And then we spent the next hour and a half or so actually talking about what you do. So we're going to try really hard to condense that into 30 minutes today. So Adam, bearing in mind that time, just to give people a little bit of a backstory, could you tell them, what you do and how you sort of have created a community and built events, just to give people a bit of a snapshot?
Yeah, very briefly, I never set out to be an event organizer. I describe myself as an accidental sort of event owner, I suppose, in many respects. We started out on our journey in 2012, and really it was all around building a meaningful relationship with a community of individuals that I felt passionate about. And that community was financiers and investors in the global renewables markets. And I really started with a problem, which was, how can I develop a meaningful and sort of long-lasting relationship with those key individuals so that I can work with them in consultancy and in sort of a whole series of different ways over a long period. And that all started with kind of like building trust with them through content. And so that was really the start of the journey, Matt. And along the way, we accidentally built a membership platform. We accidentally built an editorial team. And of course, by listening to our community, we ended up actually facilitating introductions, first in sort of informally in bars through network meets, and then sort of more recently through sort of much more managed sort of, sort of professionally organized conferences and events, which is what got us to where we are now.
That's great. And I think the community aspect, if we have time today, I'd like to touch on a little bit more, because I know that's something a lot of organizers are looking at as to how they can build community. So you kind of fell into it by accident, whereas now people are proactively trying to, figure out how they build their community. But let's come on to your events. And maybe we start the conversation around the process. So, you had a physical conference. I think actually you started with a call to the pub and had a speaker and had people turn up at a pub. Maybe that's where you first started. But how did you come around thinking, okay, I can't do the physical, I need to do something virtual? What was the sort of thinking behind that?
I think the journey was, it wasn't like there was sort of a sudden epiphany on it. It was very much part of a sort of an ongoing conversation that we had with with our sort of membership, with our community. and also with our sponsors, and crucially kind of keeping those two conversations going at the same time, because they've both got different sort of wants and desires from an event. And really at the beginning of this year, for clarity, we were due to hold a conference in Boston in May, which would have been right in the teeth of of the pandemic. And it was, in March, I was coming back from the US, and there was sort of, the headlines were starting to come through. And it was that moment where it was like, well, do we need a backup plan? What should we do here? And we did what everyone did to start with, which was, we got on the phone with our sponsors, we spoke to our membership community, and we said, look, what do you want to do? And we pushed it back very early to September. And at that point, we actually said to them, look, if we can't hold this in person, what do you want us to do? And we had that conversation with them very openly and very transparently before we'd made a decision on a studio. And that was really what helped us kind of, I guess, go on a journey with them and kind of get to a point where it was like, understand what their needs were and understand perhaps what they didn't want as much as what they did want. Because I think getting to that point is actually, once you can layer on all the tech and you can layer on all the kind of the production values, but if you don't start with that real nugget of like what the customer wants, you're kind of dead in the water. You're building on a bed of sand. And that really started back in May. It kind of went through.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, interestingly, the balance of conversation, it's a topic I've spoken to lots of people about in this week, but the conversation from your members who are paying members, I think that's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
So how are you balancing the sort of conversation maybe with those members who are they more focused on content, or is the focus around the networking and the driving business? How are you balancing that conversation between those paying their fee and wanting to learn and those paying their fee and wanting business?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because the membership was, when we initially built the membership, we built the membership around kind of, informal networking. So the ability to be able to join us, when I was sticking my credit card behind the bar in a London bar, and kind of a bit of content. So it was very informal. And obviously as it grew, we built the structure of the membership and we deepened that kind of that content structure. And also the trigger for a lot of the membership was, of course, the event. So the event sat at the center of it. And, really what our customers and what our membership were looking for was they were looking for that in-person networking. And, that crucially, that kind of serendipity, the ability to be able to walk up to someone at a coffee stand and tap them on the shoulder, without it look like they're stalking them in a sort of, in a cyber stalking kind of way. And that was the bit that kind of we were quite open about at the start, and sort of saying, look, there's a lot of great tech coming through the ranks, but what you will experience this year will be markedly different from that. So we didn't try and build an event that was directly replicating what we were planning to do. In fact, we actually said, look, consider it a different type of event. Consider this, like, free your mind, and like we're gonna deliver something that we think is different. It's gonna have the same name, but ultimately the way it comes together is going to be materially different. And that really started that acceptance, that acknowledgement that that's what we were going to do, meant that we kind of have much more free reign over what we were going to do with the budget and kind of how we were going to build from that point, because we had their acknowledgement that it wasn't going to be the same.
That's good. I mean, it's the common theme, I think, is the openness and transparency with customers when talking about the switch of what they may expect. So, okay, so you've sort of set the scene and you understand what the audience wants and what your members or what your sponsors want. How did you go about, and feel free to share it if you don't mind, or if you can't, that's also fine. How did you go about selecting the technology before we get to the studio, the technology to facilitate that sort of that networking environment? How did you get there?
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was a long process, and it was actually the biggest cost looking back on it over this year. In those early days, when we kind of made the decision to build the studio and build that sort of television set, as it were, making the decision was actually relatively easy. Then going through that kind of the R&D about kind of understanding what the different platforms did, at the back end for the networking, and what the sort of the production, as in the stream, and how that studio was going to come together. There were two different projects that were running concurrently, and at the same time we had the sort of our sponsors and our membership, where we committed to kind of to work with them, and we were talking with them literally every 2 weeks, and keeping them posted with what we were doing. So we kind of, the pressure was very much on at that point. And I freely admit that the decision we had on on the software was a very hard decision, because the software producers and providers really, they were pivoting at the same time that we were. And it came down to kind of like, you could have some great customer success people, but actually, would the software deliver and stack up? And I think we've all had positive and negative experiences about that over the last year, as it were. But for us, the overriding sort of decision really was, how can we select a piece of software that basically delivers an experience for us that sort of was most similar to what our community knew and understood in digital networking. We weren't necessarily looking for something that was entirely new. We wanted to find something that people could kind of intuitively use, as it were. And we think we found that. We use SpotMe, and as a concept, facilitating wise, it was it fit the bill. I think there were a lot of hiccups along the way, and maybe that's a story for a separate day. But I think in terms of the way that came together, it was the planning and the prep of that kind of was absolutely key. And really, the challenge that we found there was actually, once we'd made that decision, it was then educating our customers and educating the sponsors on what they needed to do in order to be able to make the most of that software too, because that's actually often forgotten. It's like, you can, as an event organizer, you can make the decision, you can put in the software, but if you've not got your sponsors on board, and your sponsors don't understand the benefit of it, and perhaps worse, you end up with like a much deeper relationship with like a marketing team, or traditionally it's our business development managers that were buying sponsorship. So suddenly we're now working with their marketing teams, and we're just creating a massive to-do list for them, Matt. And they're saying, well, hang on a second, we've got to build out a digital booth, and we've got to do this, and the danger was that if we didn't cap that sort of quick enough in terms of how much was good enough, then they were just going to spend more and more time on it. And actually, as they spent more and more time on it, we were like ramping up the expectation on what it could do. And the danger is that you can end up in a scenario where that marketing team, or that team that has invested all that time in it, has an expectation from the platform that, aside from the fact that the tech can actually do it on its own, the reality is your community might not be ready to kind of engage in that meaningful way, as it were. So the tech can create the leads and can do all that sort of stuff. But if your community is not using it, and they are passively watching, or they're engaging in it in a different way, or they've got their email on one screen and they've got the live stream on another, then it's kind of, you've got a real problem with your sponsors there, Matt. And that's not a software issue, that's not a tech issue, but that is a huge challenge in terms of expectation management. And quite honestly, that's the hidden cost. That was the, beyond the tech platform, it's like, it's understanding the implementation phase of that I think we certainly spent they were hard lessons to sort of learn.
And I think there's a couple of things there that I'd love to explore at some point, but the whole onboarding process for lots of these virtual events is tough, because, like you said, you've got organizers learning, you've got platforms still evolving and learning, and then you've got the buyers who are kind of still not sure. And there was an example someone gave last night that, if I have an email that goes out to 75,000 people, and I say to someone, it costs you X to put a banner on that, they pretty much know exactly what they're going to get, and they just need to get you a banner and they're going to get something. And you started with email lists. So whereas now we're kind of, like you said, you've got this huge tick list. So you don't want to dwell on that too much, but did you keep it simple for them?
We tried to. Like, the mantra was always about really kind of like boiling it back down to the fact that as I say, because we had none of the baggage of like, you know, I don't come from a sort of a conference and event industry, you know, sort of history, as it were. So I never read the rule book. So we never knew what was right and wrong. And I think if you wind the clock back to pre-COVID, and yes, there was a time pre-COVID, you know, it's a reminder of what made our events at that point effective. And it wasn't the sort of what I would call all of the frills around the edge. It was the content, and it was the people. And I think that, and it's the engagement of both. You know, it was the fact that you could keep people there all day because you had that content. And I think that sometimes that can get forgotten. And I think the other element that kind of comes into it, Matt, is that although it might feel like it when we're in the teeth of this, there's a sense that, you know, this is the new normal. And I would challenge that, because for us, the reason why people join us and, you know, become part of our community is because they want those full interactions. They want that human, you know, people by people, Matt, you know, and that's where trust is built. And they want those interactions, and they also want the sort of the chaos, that comes with those interactions too, because that is what building a relationship is like. And I think, you know, a lot of the sort of the software that is incredible and that has kind of moved on so far over the last 12 months, you know, it's just been given sort of a caffeine shot every single day, has been very, very effective, but it forgets that seemingly random nature and that ability to be able to kind of connect two humans, and for them to share a story about, you know, I don't know, you know, bad parenting or whatever it is. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, that's what you're looking for. And that's the beauty of an event. And looking beyond COVID and looking at how you can use technology to be able to kind of empower that human interaction for us was absolutely key. It was like, how do we make sure that it doesn't dwarf what we've built? You know, we don't smother it, as it were, but we use it to kind of boost it.
So, I mean, on that, it makes sense to sort of start talking about the studio a little bit more, I think, and how, I think you used the term, you were trying to choreograph an experience, and that very much then, I think, relates to this. So there's two sides to this. What made you decide, or maybe just for the audience benefit, tell people a little bit about the studio that you created and what you did, and then we'll get into a little bit of why you decided to go that route and do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, the studio, I'm smiling because it kind of, you know, the danger is, yeah, well, and also the danger is you get onto a chat like this, and the danger is you're perceived as an expert, and the reality is, you know, we're all learning. Like, you know, no one is any further really ahead. It's just, you know, someone might have just had the confidence or the balls or the brass neck to be able to just try it. And for us, I mean, it's worth saying that you know, although the market I work in is the global renewable investment market, and I frequently get sort of mistaken for an economics student. You know, 20 years ago, I studied theatre and performance, Matt. You know, like, I'm not a bright lad. You know, it's very easy to forget that actually at the heart of great events is great theatre, and that for me was the key for the sort of the studio concept. It was kind of like, how can we kind of, you know, without reading that rule book, how can we get to a point whereby we build an experience for the customer, you know, not just for the sponsor, but for the community, that they want to be part of, that they're excited about, that's got energy. And the studio was built in that way. So yes, I did have some conversations with some, you know, very professional production companies in the event space. But really, that wasn't necessarily giving us the sort of the creative freedom that we felt we needed to be able to kind of to build and control that space. So we ended up actually working with a theatre production company. And again, if you look back at what's happened over the last 9 months, one of the industries that has been hit, you know, as part of the events industry is the theatre production industry. And, you know, what they might lack in commercial nuance and commercial kind of like, you know, kind of like maybe customer management of us, we would, you know, forgive them tenfold in terms of their creativity and their ability to be able to build a set, work to a very tight budget, and create high impact. And that's what we were looking for, because my view was this is almost the event. Really, yes, it needs to be able to deliver against the expectations of our sponsors and deliver the sort of the learning and the networking to a degree for our community. But ultimately, I really viewed it as a way to kind of really ramp up our marketing and to pack a punch. It was like throwing an event into a firework and shooting it 300 meters into the air. And it was kind of like, how do we do that? I'm not going to do that if we go all corporate with a very something too sophisticated. And so the studio we built literally, I mean, the event was an American conference, so we built a studio that replicated a Boston skyline with TV cameras and so forth, and we built it in Oxfordshire, and it kind of started there, but it was always built with the goal of working out, that at some point we are going to be leaving this global pandemic. Like, it will happen. We will eventually. Yeah. So it's like, how do we get there? And for us, it was kind of like, I needed an exit strategy, Matt. I needed a way to be able to say, this is what we're doing now, and we're going to be able to learn all the way through here, and like take this with us. And that was the concept of the studio. It's kind of like, how can we take that studio and then scale it, when we're allowed to build an audience? So we do what Top Gear do, right? You inject a live studio audience in, it's a car show, but like it works in the same way.
So, I mean, on that note, I've got, when you're talking about creating high impact and you're talking theatre and production, and you mentioned you've got the skyline, so you've built nice visual, I think, interaction for people. But you also mentioned, Top Gear has got cars. Theatre has singing, dance, and music. I mean, were you dressed up as Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, or how did you create that kind of level of impact for people beyond, again, just people talking to camera, maybe?
Yeah. So the energy in the room was a key one, because that's what you get on it when you walk onto a stage, or you've got speakers walking onto a stage. You've got that energy in the room. You've got that, I've used it a couple of times, but it's that caffeine hit, right? And for me and for our team, the ability to be able to create that with the studio, whereby we weren't just walking in front of a camera in a barn in Oxfordshire, but we were actually like walking on, and there were 1,000 people staring back at us. That's what we wanted to create. So, from a lighting perspective, from a sort of a tech perspective, we kind of did it. We built it as if we had that audience behind us. So like, it was built in a professional way, as if like, for those of you that know, when you're standing on a stage on a TV or on a TV studio set, you can't see beyond the lights. So it's a simple thing, but you don't want to be able to see anything beyond that point, because you are in that world. And it's little tweaks like that. The other little tweak we made was, you mentioned music. We had music playing all the time through the breaks, loud, because it got the buzz and the adrenaline of the room going. And it meant that when you were cutting back onto camera and you were onto an auto cue, you had that energy that is needed, and I think you're actually, in just the same way that, if you're watching a stand-up comic on, Netflix or whatever it was. I was watching a Michael McIntyre thing this morning. You watch him on stage, and, the briefing that you are then giving to your speakers, is about exaggerated movement. It's about owning that space. And actually, we spent a lot of time on that. So, yes, we made sure our tech team, we ran it like a TV studio. So we used our events producer to act as our show caller. We had redundancy on our auto cues. We had an on-site director, and we ran it like a military sort of military machine, as it were. But we also made sure that all our sponsors and all our speakers sort of understood how serious / fun we were trying to make it. We needed them to get that heart rate up before they were on stage, because if they didn't feel that, it would be flat and you lose your audience.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think we've got about 5 minutes left. And I think maybe something that we could touch on here, very briefly, but budgets. I mean, one may think that, you know, creating your own studio and devising this set may be quite incredibly expensive. You know, when you're already looking at the potential software costs and so on. I mean, you mentioned that you use a sort of local production company, you use local theatre. If you don't want to give away financials, that's absolutely fine. But how did you sort of balance, you know, okay, it is going to cost us this, but what we're going to get back in the long run is you know, potentially tenfold or whatever it might be. So how did you look at it from the cost perspective?
Yeah, I think there are two elements to this that, again, the sort of subtlety gets lost sometimes. But on the willingness to invest, you know, it's very interesting, because if this were a traditional event, you know, remember, you know, when this was happening for us, we'd already locked in a lot of our commercial agreements. You know, our community is a membership community. You know, we need to retain them, and also we wanted to attract more people to the platform. So, you know, in many respects, the sort of the budgets were there, you know, at that point. You know, the challenge now is markedly different. You know, we're 9 months on, everyone's looking at rebooks for next year. I can kind of come on to that. But at that point, you had budget locked against that event. And, you know, there are two mindsets you can go into. You can go in with a mindset of, I need to clam up this budget because I don't know what's going to happen next year, and I'm therefore going to make it, you know, opening a laptop costs nothing, so I'm going to give you £2.50 type thing. Or you can go in with the mindset of, actually, I want to own that space. And to be quite honest, and I'm not saying that we're reckless when we do that, but I just think you need to be able to have some confidence in what you're delivering on that, and believe in what your audience want, and sort of to take a leap of faith with it, a calculated leap of faith. So,
of course,
yes, we did invest in the event. On the matter of price, I mean, again, if audience members want specifics, I can kind of I can deal with that. If they want to DM me or find me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to to cover that off, sort of on a one-to-one basis. But I think if I could say that it's not as much as you think, and I viewed the budget as a marketing budget, not as anything else. So it was really seen as like, how can I use this to grow and retain and grow sponsorship revenue next year? You know, how can I make sure that the sponsors we're working with now are all, you know, with the dice are loaded in our favor for 2021, and how do I guarantee that rebook early? That's what I was looking at. On the tech software side of things, and again, I mentioned we use SpotMe. You know, we did turn the thumbscrews on the deals we got on that, because we felt that they were learning when we were learning, and we're quite prepared to sort of, you know, we always take a long lens on the investment there, and if it works, we'll build on that partnership and kind of, you know, and kind of take it from there, as it were. But I think it's about placing bets, Matt. It's about calculated bets on different areas and not putting your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, I know we have a few minutes left. Maybe you could give us a kind of 30 seconds. You talked about the scalability of this project. What's next? How are you going to replicate this, you know, around the world? Maybe try and give us a quick view on that.
Yeah. So we're back in. We're building the studio. Is going live again on December 10th. And this was an event actually that wasn't in our calendar. So we've put a new event against it, and we've loaded more sponsorship against it. So to be quite honest, we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be great. And for next year, the plan for us is, as I said earlier, really is to take that concept of the studio and work out how, when live events do come back, we can use that to kind of effectively like create certainty in our planning, as it were. So how can we use that studio concept in such a way that we can plop it wherever we're going to plop it, you know, in the middle of a wind farm or whatever, and then introduce an audience if we can, and as we grow, as it were. So I don't have a crystal ball. I think one thing we know for certain is that, you know, government decision making is kind of, you know, made on the back of a napkin, you know, or something that they find and sort of, you know, pull out of a hat, as it were. So it's impossible for us to be able to plan for that. But what we can control is that studio and how it kind of builds, and that's what we're looking to do.
Brilliant, Adam. I think there's some Q&A. I can't see at the minute, but I think James will come into that. So maybe if I could try and summarize that into 3 or 4 points. One, it's obviously about talking to your audience, both for you, for your members and your sponsors, and understanding what they need and want so that you can deliver them something relevant. And then choreographing them an experience that seems, vital to the success of what you've created. And I think the bit that I actually took away most from that is to commit and believe in what you're doing and what you're delivering for your audience. Not thinking that as, I also have to do this. It's like, no, we're doing this because it's delivering X, Y, and Z to our customers. That's kind of what I've taken away from that. I think we are pretty much up on time. Whilst we wait for James to come in, Adam, if people do want to... if Adam, people do want to find out a little bit more about you, where can they go? Is LinkedIn best, or where do you want to point them?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably best. It's Adam Barber. You can find me. I'm pretty much at the top of those lists when you find there. And the website for the event was our community is awordabouTwind.com, and the event's called Financing Wind.
Awesome, thank you, Adam.
Of course, Matt. The easiest way to do it, Matt and Adam, is via the Event Tech Live virtual platform.
I mean, of course.
You're dead right.
Hey.
Who knew?
Yeah, because Adam's details are on there. So if you're watching this via the platform, you're already logged in. All you've got to do is go and find Adam Barber, click the interested button. Adam, you do the same thing. Click the interested button when you get a notification, and boom, we're in business.
It's almost like we primed you for that one.
Boom,
we set that up for you, James.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. And also, I've got to do the pirouette of destiny as opposed to the pivot board of destiny.
Nice.
Now.
Well played.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Some questions for you. Let's get back to the serious matter in hand of this session, guys. Adam and Matt, there's some questions that have come in. Firstly, specifically for Adam, how could you have previewed the hiccups that happened along the way? What have we learned from it?
What have we learned from it? Sorry, what have we learned from it?
Yeah, the question is, how could you have previewed the hiccups? Yeah, what have you learned from the hiccups? Yeah. Could you have foreseen any of the hiccups as you went through this process?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest hiccup, which I think we turned into an opportunity in the end, was it was a streaming issue, always is. We didn't get a second line into the building, and we absolutely should have done, and we turned it to our advantage because we ended up putting on-demand sessions up faster where some people have missed it, and kind of turned it into a bit of a thing, which was quite good. We also didn't have enough backup on some of our speakers. So one of our speakers was in Greece, in Athens at the time, and literally an earthquake took place while he was on a panel session. And so he quite literally, he actually then switched to his iPhone and was walking outside, still on the panel session while there was an earthquake. And we probably needed a bit of redundancy on speakers there because we cut it too fine.
Yeah. Well, hey, learning curve for everybody. We're in the same boat this week. Some more questions from Glissa. Do you think audiences are expecting too much of organisers at the moment, as many of us haven't had a lot of experience producing events this way? Do you think we need a little bit of consideration for the fact that organisers are adapting in this period of time?
Maybe if I could start on that. Based on some of the stuff I talked about with Adam, but with others as well, I think it really comes to that openness and honesty and transparency conversation with your audience and your sponsor. If they're coming in to expect it's the same event that they've always had, it's kind of what Adam said at the start of this, they'll be pleasantly surprised or disappointed that it's not the same. So I think it's being honest about what you're doing and what you're delivering, and what you hope they could get from it. I think must be crucial to the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Adam, anything to expand on that one?
The only thing I'd add to that is the phrase is, it's 4 words. It's benefit of the doubt. It's like you want to get to a point. As Matt said, if you know your audience well enough, and you're having that conversation with them openly, pre, during, and after the event, honestly, they'll forgive you a lot of sins. But I don't think you should tell them that everything's going to be fine and stick your fingers in your ears. And, you know, there will be out the back of this events that fall by the wayside because they're not close enough to that audience.
Guys, I'm going to squeeze one more question in really, really quickly. So let's get a quick response on this. Do you think we need to support customers to use the tech and spend time educating them?
Onboarding, yes, is key. We just need to make the experience as simple as humanly possible. And all these platforms have evolved massively in the last 8 or 9 months. And I would hope over, you know, the next 8 or 9 months, just that whole onboarding process is so simple and easy for people to use that, you know, it should be minimal amounts of onboarding. They shouldn't have to watch 10-minute videos and seminars and so on. I think that's part of it, but let's make it as easy as possible.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, guys. Go on, Adam. One final point, very quickly.
No, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I'd also say, like, you know, be aware of who is, you know, who is the customer facing point of your brand. You know, because there is a danger that you know the software provider can say yes to everything, and you can end up with them front facing to your customer, and they are dictating that customer experience. And I think, you know, that can be a very empowering thing. That can be fantastic. But if they don't culturally understand what the event is and what you're trying to achieve, they will inadvertently or otherwise set the tone for that event. And I think that can be dangerous.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. Adam Barber, Tamarind Group, Matt Coyne, Waves Connects. As I said to everybody, if you want to hook up with the guys and continue this discussion a bit further, do so in the Event Tech Live virtual platform. And let's see some more of your virtual pirouettes as well. We're going to move away from pivoting. We are now pirouetting in that direction. Guys, we'll see you both very, very soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
We're now going to move on to a tech demo.